the things, by the way, that I've been told by people from PHT, their funding comes from the Commonwealth. They have requirements from there say, you've got to do it by a certain date. All these services have to be live on the 1st of January next year, so there's an awful lot of work to be done. So time frame is tight, but maybe, I'm not sure. You have to live with that. Going back to the PowerPoint, what I'd like to do is just show you a few things. So I've got screenshots on there for you. So again, that drop-down menu, and again the tender, and of course, once you get into it, those particular areas. So again, top 3, download the documents, post up any questions, actually complete your response. Right? Now, the reason Tenderlink is so good is because it allows Julia or PHT people to download your responses and to compare apples with apples really easily. It's all done quite easy, right, from the website. So as long as you've completed your information correctly, it makes their life a lot easier as well. So again, the response that I've talked about, late tenders are not accepted. Some people say, well, what if there's a glitch? Internet goes down, right? NBN, right? What I would do, of course, if the deadline's 2 o'clock, please don't upload at 1:59, right? So, and again, I buy myself a bit of time, so I've got that leeway if I need to. So basically on the morning of the 30th, I'm ready, everything's ready to upload. If there's some glitch, there's time frame to sort of deal with that, right? So, and again, online response form is of course a must, so you have to use that one. Sometimes, and it's not the case for that particular tender, but there might be information sessions on that tender. Most of the time, it's up to you whether you attend or not. Doesn't matter if you do or not. In some rare cases, it could be compulsory, but it will tell you. I don't think that's the case for PHT, but I've seen one recently where they were doing some work on a building and they said to prospective tenderers, we've got an information session in the building so we can show you. If you don't turn up, we don't consider your tender. So it was a compulsory thing. So it is highly unlikely here. And of course, it's up to you whether you attend, always a good idea. From what I know, that particular tender does not have one. So there you go. Secondary information. So secondary information like financial information, company information, references from other clients and so on may be sought. And to be honest with you, in most cases, there'll be a document that you need to complete. It's unlikely to be done in any other way. And so for you, it's of course to complete that document as much as you can. As I said, for PHT point of view, it'll always ask you to fill in some boxes or some information to do that. Same with budgeting. Key thing about that one, you've got a spreadsheet, use that one, play around with it for a bit to make sure it all makes sense. It's got formulas built in, so it should all tally up and so on. So just make sure that it's all quite clear. Again, in the do's and don'ts later on, I'm going to tell you that you don't create your own documents. You use the ones that are given to you. So there's a list of documents. We've gone through most of them to some degree, just to give you an idea of the documents. And again, the criteria, of course, very important. I will come back to talk a bit about the terms and conditions. Right. There again are the criteria. So, what happens? Done my response, done all the right thing, uploaded it, now what? So what Julia can do, or some of the team, is in the back end, which you don't see, of course, through Tenderlink, they can then, after the closing date and time, download all the submissions. And they can actually look at everything electronically. They don't have to print the whole thing out. And that makes it easy for them. And to answer your question before, that every tender is looked at for potential conflicts of interest. And that's dealt with before any assessment occurs. So the board have to be satisfied that there are no conflicts of interest, and then the assessment process can begin. And that's what happens next. And it'll be done in a reasonable time frame. Normally, I always laugh because reasonable can mean anything you want it to mean. but normally within a couple of weeks in order to get everybody together. Of course, there's external people, but normally within a reasonable time frame. The other thing with that one is that, of course, particularly this tender we've been looking at, is not going to probably happen in one session. It's so complex with so many submissions, it's going to take quite some time. So you've got to be patient. They have a time frame to meet, of course, but yeah, it's going to take some time for them to get through it. So the easier you make it for them, the better, right? So make sure complete the right documents in the right way. So there are assessments based on the criteria and the weightings, of course. And as I said before, each of that is scored for you. So your bid is looked at on its own merits in relation to that criteria. And the assessment panel reaches a consensus decision as to what that score should be. Some organisations, some government organisations, might say we'll average out the scores. Somebody says 8, somebody says 7, we'll make it a 7.5. My understanding is at PHT that everything will be a consensus decision. So if someone says 8 and someone says 6, there's debate until there's agreement reached about what it should be. So again, another reason to be rest assured, and the probity auditor is overseeing that whole process as well. All right. Now, for example, I mentioned this example this morning where I've done some work for Defence. I used to be in the Air Force many years ago, and they have a policy that you are not allowed to average, because their argument is one scores 8 and one scores 2, and you average that out, it's a nonsensical number, which I agree with. What I've said to them is it will never happen. And the reason it never happens is because we're all looking at the same piece of paper. If someone says 2 and someone says 8, something is wrong. And therefore someone's biased for or against a particular provider. Therefore there's a problem, you've got to sort that out before you get any further, right? So, but if someone says 8 and 7 and you average, I don't see a problem with that. But having said all that, PHT's procurement framework says, you know, we're going to reach a consensus decision. So you can rest assured again, is debated. And anyway, everybody's looking at the same information, so it shouldn't be drastically different. The assessment panel may also ask shortlisted tenderers to make a presentation. And again, this is not the case for this current tender, but it was for a recent one where the shortlisted providers were asked to come in to do a presentation on their bid. And that is also assessed, and that forms part of the overall assessment. Again, nothing to worry about for this tender, but just so that you know it may happen. Now, this one has usually received a few questions. So, clarifications. The assessment panel is sitting, they've got your bid, something doesn't make sense. So, they need to contact you to clarify what did you mean by this. Now, if you've done all the right thing, hopefully that'll never happen. But the clarification, the key thing about it is it's not an opportunity for you to put in a separate bid or another bid or rebid or whatever. It's obviously only done when something you've written doesn't make sense. And it should never result in any financial difference, except if the adding up was incorrect, which in this case will never happen because the formulas will automatically add things up for you. But I knew of one on the mainland, for example, where, for argument's sake, they had 6 things, adds up to $100, and when you actually look at it, it actually adds up to $98.40. So that's not right. And so in a clarification process, might go back to them saying, you've got a calculation error, can you please have a look at that and advise us? And with clarifications, we point you in a direction, we don't tell you what the answer should be, right? So, but most of the clarifications will be, did you mean to tick that box? Or you've got some wording here, but it doesn't make sense. But all clarifications will be done in writing, so email's fine. And if we need to clarify the same issue with a number of providers, it'll be done in an identical fashion. So as a probity auditor, again, that's one of the things that I look for. I did one recently, or a couple of years ago actually, here in Hobart, different organisation, and they had to clarify some things. So I said, I need to see the information that goes out, and I'm insisting that all the information comes back in writing on a certain template so that everyone fills in the identical information answer to that question. But I want to see the questions. Have you framed it in the right way so that you're not leading people as to how to answer?